Hello, and sorry about the delay in this update. I'm going to try to knock it out, maybe add a little bit of background to it as well. So, June the 14th, I went to have a PET scan done. This is a CT scan that uses a special radioactive dye that bonds with the sugar uh, usage caused by cancer cells. In February of this year, I finished a round of chemotherapy to try to get rid of a B cell lymphoma I had. What they found is that it didn't quite get rid of all of it. There was still a spot of it in the PET scan at the end of the chemotherapy, but a biopsy did not show any um, lymphoma, so they put me in monitoring, which is a 5-year period that you get PET scans on a periodic basis. I think it's twice a year. My first follow-up PET scan was June the 14th. By the time it rolled around, my throat had gotten so sore that I could not talk anymore without being extremely painful. It is still slightly painful now, so I might have to pause the video every few minutes to recover from it a little bit. Anyway, the PET scan came back positive. I went from probably what would be called very early stage 1 to late stage 2 since the finishing of my chemo. I it appears that the form of lymphoma I had is called a gray zone B cell lymphoma because it had I'll explain this to you in a little bit, but that kept the normal chemo for B cell lymphoma from being fully effective. Since then, last Thursday, I started chemotherapy again. This time, the sessions will be closer together, and there will be more of them. And I was given a IV steroid that I believe is starting to wear off now, and that helped me with the pain in my throat, reducing the inflammation that's causing the pain. I'm starting to take ibuprofen to see if it relaxes. The last time I went through chemo, the first chemo round pretty much wiped the pain down to real low that I was having before it. But I was on steroids for 5 days after the chemo. Anyway, I don't know when I'm going to recover enough to start going back to making content. And I'm going to pause the recording for a few minutes, recover a little bit, and then start into the background of what happened and why and everything that's going on. So please bear with me. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Anyway, on to the background. In February of 22, I caught COVID, the Omicron variant, and the symptoms were nothing, just light head cold for a couple of days, about 3 days. But the long COVID was exhaustion, which a lot of people have done, lasted 4 or 5 weeks. Of course, I was working through that period, and it was kind of exhausting. I started getting a sore throat in March, and my wife babysits my uh, one of our granddaughters while her mom was at work, and she got sent home from school with strep throat. So I thought that was what my problem was. I got strep throat, so I went and saw my doctor. He examined me, told me it wasn't strep throat, but because I had COVID, it was it weakens your immune system, and it's likely to be just a common bacterial that infected me because of my weakened immune system. I'm like, okay, that's fine. He gave me antibiotics for it, and he gave me a 2 week dose of antibiotics and scheduled me returning it. During that 2 weeks I was taking the antibiotics per the prescription, my sore throat got worse. I went back at the end of the 2 weeks, and he gave me a different type of antibiotic because different bacterial infections respond to different antibiotics. By the end of that 2 weeks, when I was supposed to return to see him, my throat had gotten to be so sore and I couldn't hear that I couldn't sleep at night. And I guess I found out later inflammation was so bad that it closed my ear canals off. So it was like listening to something from underwater all the time. Well, before that, when it got that bad, I contacted an ear, nose, throat specialist to go see him. Of course, it being COVID time, it took a while to get in to see him. So at the end of the second 2 weeks, I went back and saw my doctor, and I informed him that I was seeing an ENT specialist. It was late May actually, before I got to see ENT specialist. He took about 5 minutes to examine me and said I had severe tonsillitis. He gave me 2 antibiotics to take at the same time and rescheduled me to come back in 2 weeks. The antibiotics did absolutely nothing for me. In the 2 weeks I came back, he scheduled me into um, surgery. He wanted to put tubes in my ears so I could hear again and do a tonsillectomy. At the time, I was 54 years old. So 2 weeks later, I went under the knife. It's June the 21st, 2022. He took out my left tonsil and most of my right tonsil, but when I was in the recovery room and woke up, he told me that the inflammation was so bad that my right tonsil got too close to a major artery and he felt it unsafe to remove the whole thing. He also told me that he had never seen a throat in such bad condition as mine and it not be cancer. So he scheduled me back in 2 weeks for a biopsy. In that 2 weeks, the left side tonsil pretty much healed up where it was removed, but the right side showed no signs of healing at all. He did a biopsy, and I returned to his office 3 weeks later for the results. They didn't find any results of cancer. He immediately sent me in for a CT scan at the hospital next door to his office, and there was no wait. I went straight over there, did the CT scan, came back to his office. He had the results. They showed nothing unusual, so he scheduled me to go to the State University Cancer Research Center, ENT division, for them to run diagnostics and see what they could find out. So I went there the first time in August, and I believe it was September. They did a second biopsy. This time they included a biologic uh, infection test, and they found that I had 2 bacterial deep tissue infections of what is basically common bacteria that lives in most people's throat, but my weakened immune system apparently allowed it to infect me. I went to a infectious disease specialist locally. It's a 4-hour drive to State University where I was being they were trying to diagnose me as far as the cancer was concerned. By this time, I was literally living off of ice cream and protein shakes. That's all I could drink or eat. Drinking water, I was having to deaden my throat to just drink the protein shakes with this concoction that one of the doctors made gave me prescription called Magic Mouthwash. It has antacid, lidocaine, and Benadryl in it mixed together. You can gargle it in the back of your throat where the injury was, and not worry about swallowing it because it's swallowable. But it deadened my throat for a few minutes, long enough for me to drink a couple protein shakes and rinse it out with water to reduce the pain. And I was losing weight like it was going out of style. Anyway, I had to have a peripheral intravenous catheter installed for 4 weeks and a round the clock IV drip, which was an elastic ball that I could set up and change out once a day. They had 2 different antibiotics in it that took care of the infection. It took 4 weeks. I had to take off work for those 4 weeks. Once that was done, it helped a little bit with the pain, but not much, and the pain slowly grew back up. I returned in the first week of January of 23. I went to the hospital to University Medical Center because they said because I spotted what looked like some sort of growth or something on the base of my tongue in the back. They did another biopsy and they did a swallow test and found that my throat was not working properly because of the inflammation. My Adam's apple wasn't moving and shifting right, and they didn't know how I was able to even drink the protein shakes. It was so bad. So they put a feeding tube in my stomach and set me up with uh, being fed through a feeding tube at home that way. I was on that feeding tube for a year. They also did a third biopsy at the end of that stay, and then I came home, went back 2 weeks later for the results, and they still had found no signs of cancer. So the cancer specialist said that they believed it was probably an autoimmune disorder, and they asked me to find a rheumatologist locally and schedule an appointment with them. Took a while, and I got in to see a rheumatologist. They run a battery of tests, and the first one I saw, and they didn't find any autoimmune disorders, but they did find that in the recent weeks, I had developed a chronic infection called um, Vincent's angina, which causes deterioration of mucous membrane in your throat and an infection of the tonsils. I went back to see the infectious disease specialist, and he treated me for that, which was just oral antibiotics for about a month. And And I was over that. It didn't help much, but he it had was July of 23 by the time he finished that, and he said there's something else going on besides that. He'd been telling me that from the first time he saw me. So he asked me if I would do another biopsy. And I said, well, yeah, if he thought he could figure out what was going on, that'd be fine. So he scheduled me back to the original ENT specialist to do a biopsy. The ENT scheduled me in, actually the next day from when I saw him. I went in and did the biopsy and scheduled return for 2 weeks when biopsy results came back. In the meantime, I went to see a different rheumatologist, a new one in our area, who the original one specialized more in rheumatoid arthritis than she did autoimmune diseases. So this one was a specialist in autoimmune disease. And she was very thorough. She gave me a very thorough examination, run a whole battery of tests on me, and scheduled me to come back to see her when she knew she had the test results back. When I went back to the ENT specialist for the follow-up 2 weeks after the biopsy, he said somebody had intercepted the biopsies, which was the infectious disease doctor, I found out, and sent it off to a different lab, so he didn't have the results back yet. And in a way, I'm glad he did, because the infectious disease specialist sent it off for a very wide range of tests. The next thing I know, I was contacted by an oncologist from the nearest cancer clinic, which is associated with the hospital. Both the ENT and the infectious disease specialist were associated with, which is about an hour drive from my house. They scheduled me for an appointment, and I didn't really know what was going on, so I followed through with it. Went in to see him, and he informed me that the lab results had came back and that what they found was I had EBV positive lymphoprolific disorder. That's Epstein-Barr virus positive. Lymphoprolific disorder is the Epstein-Barr virus is a virus most people, I believe it's Mayo Clinic. I read the information on their website. It infects about 90% of the population of the planet. When you're young, teenager, early young adult, sometimes children, get infected with it, you get sore throat 3 or 4 days, and it goes dormant and lies dormant in the B cells of your lymphatic system. If for some reason, typically stem cell transplant, uh, organ transplant, or something that compromises your immune system and weakens it enough, it can go active. And it can wreak all kinds of havoc when it does. In my case, it started mutating the B cells in my lymphatic system. And it had been working since COVID on it. So that's a year and a half they had been working, mutating the B cells in my lymphatic system, causing all the issues I've been having. The test results, recombinant DNA test, certified that it was B cells that were mutated, but the typical markers or receptors of a B cell lymphoma is CD20 positive, but mine were CD20 negative. They were CD30 positive, which is typically either a Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is T cell, or a T cell lymphoma. which makes my lymphoma a rare gray cell lymphoma. Well, since it's so rare, they treated it like the typical like B cell lymphoma, and gave me what they called CHOP, which is 3 different chemotherapies and a uh, steroid. I got 6 rounds of that, 3 weeks apart. It ended on February 15th. Halfway through it, I did a PET scan and it was showing that it was working. It reduced it down to almost nothing by its way through it. Just a pretty good hot spot at the base of my tongue where that growth was and what seems to be the center of where everything started from. At the end of the chemotherapy, I got the follow up PET scan, and there was just a tiny spot that looked like it might have it. They biopsied the area. Lab results come back negative, so they shifted me to monitoring. By this time, I was making content again. If you look at the content on any of my 2 channels, Rumble or YouTube, um, you'll find that around February of 22, I quit making content, and I didn't make it until after I started chemotherapy. And early on, my voice was very weak, but it got stronger over time. And that's because the chemotherapy was working. My throat was finally starting healing. A couple months ago, just about 2 or 3 weeks before I quit making content this time, my throat started getting sore again, like it was before. I went back to my doctor, then to the ENT specialist. My doctor thought it might be bacterial again. The ENT specialist, he gave me antibiotics, my doctor did, but it didn't do any good. ENT specialist said it's a good possibility that with everything that I've been going through, I had acid reflux, and the acid was getting up in the lower throat and keeping it from healing properly because there was a lot of damage in that area, a lot of scar tissue. He gave me acid reflux disease medicine and scheduled me back for a return visit. I also had a visit with my oncologist, and they gave me more acid reflux disease medicine. A different one that works in conjunction with the other one because it's been a week or two, and the original medication wasn't helping. And I have to take a break, so I will be right back. Sorry about that. I'm a little bit late on taking my ibuprofen, so pain's increased in my throat a little bit. Ibuprofen helps because it's an anti-inflammatory drug. Helps reduce the swelling and in turn reduces the pain. So where was I? Okay, well, the PET scan, the first follow-up monitoring PET scan was June the 14th. I went and saw my ENT specialist second time. He wanted to do a biopsy, but since it's so close to when I was doing my next PET scan, he decided to wait until after the results of that came in. Well, the results of that came in and showing kind of what I was expecting. The lymphoma was back. It was spread from that one spot on my tongue to lymph nodes in my throat and a couple of them in my chest, and my spleen was enlarged. Kind of a late stage 2 lymphoma. I canceled the biopsy with my ENT because the oncologist I'm seeing had already ready to talk to me about treatment for it. This one will be a little bit different since they know it's a gray zone, rare gray zone lymphoma with the CD30 positive um, markers or whatever they called it. He wanted to go with, add that to the treatment. So he scheduled me for 8 rounds of chemotherapy, 2 weeks apart, doing a PET scan after 4 rounds. It'll be it's three chemotherapy chemicals and an IV steroid. The three chemicals, I think one of them I know is the same because halfway through, after the fourth round, I hit the lifetime limit on that one and I can't take it anymore, so it gets dropped off the schedule. There's a lifetime limit on it because once you've had so much in your lifetime of it, it will damage your heart. So they're cutting it out before it can do that. But one of the chemicals he's added is designed to specifically target the CD30 receptors that are present in my lymphoma. So he's hoping that the combination of the three, two of them targeting the B cell lymphoma and the third one targeting the CD30 markers, will knock it out. Only time will tell. I will be trying to go back to making content as soon as the pain in my throat has subsided enough to where I can talk for longer periods of time without taking breaks. Because, as you know, DayZ and a couple of games like DayZ is played strictly online, so I can't just jump on and off of it or pause it like I can Space Engineers and some of the other games I play. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for your continued support and follow my channel, even though I'm not making much in content right now. And I appreciate all the support y'all are giving me, and hopefully I'll recover enough again soon enough that I can start making content again for y'all's viewing pleasure. Again, thank you, and I'll see you later.